great to have everyone with us, both in the room and joining us online. I'm Erica Hill, your host today. Today, we're exploring our theme, which is Future Now, and how the COVID-19 pandemic propelled the world into the future, from changes in the workplace, as well as the impact on mental health, to uncovering biases and injustice. And so joining us to dive a little deeper into these topics and more is author, entrepreneur, and the founder and CEO of Thrive, Arianna Huffington. Arianna, who likely many of you know of, or perhaps even know personally, has been named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, one of Forbes' most powerful women. She launched, of course, the Huffington Post, and has authored 15 books, among them the international bestsellers The Sleep Revolution and Thrive. She's a visionary, revolutionizing the way we work. Arianna launched Thrive to do just that. It's a behavior change technology company, which she launched in 2016 to end the myth that burnout is the price that we all have to pay for success. Arianna is going to join us shortly to discuss how we can set clear boundaries and write a new set of rules. It's a really timely conversation, as we're also looking at the Great Resignation, of course, and millions of Americans who are reevaluating, frankly, their career priorities and goals and their personal lives and how those all intersect. So we're going to get to all of that, but first I'd like to welcome another member of the Thrive team, Kasia Laskowski, who's the executive director of the Thrive Global Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of the behavior change technology company. Kasia works with nonprofit organizations. She works with the public sector, as well as educational institutions, to improve the mental health, well-being, and resilience of both their employees and the communities they serve. So Kasia, please join me on stage. So it's great to have you here with us. And I think people hear Thrive, and maybe a lot of people know what that is, but the Thrive Global Foundation is a little bit different. So if you could first just explain to us, what is the Thrive Global Foundation? What is the work that you do, and how is that different?
Sure. So first off, I would just like to say how honored I am to be here, and also just to be speaking with you, Erica. The Thrive Global Foundation, as you mentioned, is the philanthropic arm of Thrive. We are focused on bringing the technology and tools that Thrive offers to companies and their employees, and deploying them for the nonprofit sectors and other sectors as well. Giving is really part of the core DNA of Thrive. From the very beginning, Arianna made the foundation a centerpiece of the work. So it is very rare for a startup to have this philanthropic component, but it is just so core to what we do. I like to think of the work of the foundation in 3 different buckets. The first bucket is really our pro bono offerings and services. So in that bucket, we partner with individual organizations and nonprofits to provide them with some of our technology and tools. Arianna, who will be speaking in a few moments, will talk about our micro steps, which are these small actionable changes that, when done in repetition, can create lasting behavior change. So we create tailored micro steps for different organizations. We provide our workshops and trainings, and we also provide curated resources through our app. Some of those partnerships include the Partnership for New York City, which comes to mind, of course, because we are in New York. Also UNICEF Jordan. We partnered with UNICEF 2 years ago and continued our partnership to provide resources for their caseworkers. So that's really the first bucket of our work. The second bucket focuses on our initiatives and campaigns. One of them, which is our largest initiative, is First Responders First, which I will go into depth about, because that is really the reason why I am here. But we also have many other initiatives and campaigns. And that focus of our work really comes about when we identify a particular issue that we can have impact in when it comes to mental health and well-being, and we galvanize different organizations and resources to tackle that issue. Recently, we have partnered with the Los Angeles Unified School District to deploy microsteps to their teachers, parents, and students to help really communities thrive during this time. And we've also created microsteps for mindful driving, which I know we all need.
Mindful driving, yes, sign me up for that one.
Yes. And then the third bucket of our work is really startup social responsibility. I know that many people in the audience and also joining us via live stream are CSR folks. This is startup social responsibility, which I love to say because, again, it is so rare for a startup to be involved in this type of work. But our Thrivers, which is our Thrive team, we call them Thrivers, we love to give them ways to give back. We have one giving day per quarter that we offer our Thrive team to take to volunteer with their organization that they love. We also offer them employee matching. So we match up to $200 per calendar year through the foundation for their favorite donations. And we also provide curated resource guides. And I often include the work of Americares as well.
Which leads us actually into the next point in terms of the work of Americares. Americares is one of your nonprofit partners. So can you give us an idea of how did this come together? How did the Thrive Global Foundation get involved with Americares, and what does that involvement look like?
Yes, so we have been partnered with Americares since the very beginning of the pandemic. And that is through our initiative, First Responders First, which I alluded to earlier. First Responders First is an initiative of Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Thrive, and the Creative Artist Agency, which is a very large talent agency in LA. And we are unlikely partners. I will get to that in a little bit. But we really partnered together and created tremendous impact. Our initiative focuses on very simply caring for the caregiver, providing our healthcare workers at the front lines of the pandemic and our first responders with the physical and mental health resources that they need to really be resilient during this pandemic and better care for us all. So we were introduced to the work of Americares through our partner, the Creative Artist Agency. And when we really started thinking about the first phase of our work, which was really focused on crisis response, we thought to ourselves, who best to help us deliver PPE? Who best to really guide us in this area of work? And given Americares is a leading global organization helping to deliver donated medicine and has over 40 years of experience, we couldn't think of anyone better in the space to partner with. So that's really how that partnership came to be. So we first started with PPE, and then we evolved our partnership to also focus on mental health resources and really providing training to staff in clinics around the country.
And I think what I love about this partnership too, the way it came together, and even when you talk about, what Americares could bring to that partnership, it's further proof of what we're talking about today and the importance of partnerships and bringing together, as you said, perhaps what may have seemed like unlikely partners initially, but these different resources with the tools that when put together could really make such an impactful difference, and in a short amount of time.
Exactly.
Because that was key too, especially with this initiative, First Responders First, is getting it done, right? And especially in that moment. I think there are times now it's almost tough to remember how difficult things were to do at the start of the pandemic, but there were added challenges everywhere.
Yeah.
And so how does that continue today? I mean, what does First Responders First look like?
So First Responders First is alive and well. I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, just given the continued crisis, we always, funny enough, characterize our work as fast and furious, which tags on to what you said before. But our work remains fast and furious. And with First Responders First, we really consider our work in 3 different phases. The first phase, as I mentioned, was really focused on crisis response, basic protections, and provisions. So we started deploying PPE immediately. We also set up 8 free childcare hubs around the country to provide free childcare for healthcare workers. We set up 2 hotels in New York City to actually house healthcare workers who were coming in, some of them who were traveling. And we also worked with another hotel company to provide different accommodations across the country. Aside from those basic protections and provisions, though, another centerpiece of First Responders First work, we really take a page out of Thrive's book, no pun intended, because Thrive is a book, but we also really took, just this piece about mental health and really zeroed in on it. We understand at Thrive, and we understand at First Responders First, that we don't leave our whole human selves at the door when we enter work. Healthcare workers don't do that, first responders don't do that, caregivers don't do that. So we really target the whole human. In our approach to well-being, we focus on the physical needs and also the mental needs. So in this second phase of our work, we really zeroed in on our mental health resources. We started to provide these individual and free resources outside of traditional health insurance providers. What we did learn in this short amount of time is that even though the mental health needs were expressed and they were very urgent, the uptake and engagement was very low. And as a team, we took a step back because we wanted to understand when we have these resources available and we have already taken steps to address some of the stigma issues, what is still preventing healthcare workers and first responders from taking advantage of these resources? And that is when we really launched into the third phase of our work, which is the All-in Wellbeing First for Healthcare campaign. This really takes a systems approach to prioritizing the well-being of healthcare workers. All In is a collaboration and a call to action from First Responders First and the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation in partnership with many leading healthcare organizations across the country. And our goal is focused on two different aspects. First is advancing solutions that prioritize healthcare worker well-being, solutions that work and are evidence-based. And the second is to identify and eliminate the persistent mental health challenges that healthcare workers face. That can include, cultural stigma, but it also includes challenges when it comes to licensing and credentialing. So that's really what our work looks like today, is really tackling the systems piece of the work.
Which is really this whole, holistic, meaning you're really touching on so much, but I do just want to pick up on something you said, though, when you were talking about, the need was expressed, right? There was a recognition that there was a need for some mental health services and mental health support, and the tools were there, but that they weren't being taken advantage of. What was the reasoning behind that?
There are many reasons. One is a big culture that is not unlike any culture we face with veterans, with first responders. There is a lot of shame that persists within the healthcare space, but also, if you think about the language that we've used to describe our healthcare workers and first responders since the beginning of the pandemic, we've called them heroes. And they are, heroes, but for them, they're doing their job. They're all so resilient already. And so I think there is this culture of feeling like they need to be the heroes and not seeing them as human. And when it comes down to it, when you think about the humanity, I think that there's also this essential caregiving quality that a lot of healthcare workers have and caregivers have. They're not just caregivers in the workplace. They're caregivers at home. They're caregivers for their communities. They're always putting other people first. And so when you talk about putting the patient first, that's who they are prescribing mental health services to. That's who they're prescribing physical resources and medications to. So it's really about shining a light on the healthcare workers themselves and helping them understand that mental health can't be seen as a sign of weakness. It should be seen as a sign of strength.
It's interesting. I had multiple people with, healthcare workers within the industry during the pandemic, when I was covering the pandemic, who said that to me. I'm not a hero. This is not what I do. And I actually had someone say to me, they said, I know it comes from a good place, but it was almost an added burden to feel that they had this, this new sort of title on them. Have you noticed, right, with these efforts, have you noticed that start to change? That there is perhaps more acceptance of using some of these services personally?
I do think so. We, our partner in this work, the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation, which some of you may be familiar with, was founded after the tragic death by suicide of Dr. Lorna Breen, who was an emergency room physician and director of the emergency room at Columbia Presbyterian. And her family turned this tragedy into really this moment of action to really destigmatize the access to mental health resources. And through their example, they have been an example to all of us. And they have received numerous calls, emails, texts, sharing with them how much their story has impacted the lives of others. And so we see, they just had their unfortunate second anniversary of Dr. Lorna's passing, and they shared that, it really is about the hope for healthcare, that this story is bringing that hope amidst this tragedy.
One of the things you said to me too during lunch when we were just sort of getting to know each other is as you're looking at this, that the real center point here is building resiliency for, system-wide for this workforce, which is something, resiliency is something that, building resiliency is something that Americares talks about a lot, whether it's within mental health work or elsewhere. Talk to us about that resiliency and why it's so important.
So, a lot of times what we've heard over the last few years is that resilience often has a negative connotation for healthcare workers. There have been a lot of programs that focus on resiliency, meaning that healthcare workers need to be resilient. But as we all know, healthcare workers are already resilient. If we look before the pandemic, they were entering this pandemic, many of them already burnt out. They have their own tools, they have their own resources. It's not about building more resilient individuals, it's about building more resilient organizations and more resilient system. And I think part of that is understanding that these humans are at the center of that system. And in order to really create this system that is resilient, we need to create environments that allow humans to access the resources that they need to take care of themselves.
So it's about understanding who those humans are.
Exactly.
And what they need and what will be effective for them and speak to them. You touched on this a little bit, but I wonder if you could dive a little deeper on what you've learned as a foundation in partnering with other organizations, Americares, for example, and even some advice, too, that maybe you have for folks who are exploring partnerships of their own.
Yes. I've learned so much partnering with Americares. I think first and foremost, one of the things that I've learned is really just partnering with organizations that have a clear area of expertise and leaning into that expertise. As I mentioned before, when we were exploring different organizations to partner with for PPE, Americares was just the obvious choice to be one of our implementing collaborators. They were one of our first, and now we have over 24 implementing collaborators, each an expert in their own space. So I think that was something extremely important to the foundation and also to first responders first. I think Elizabeth on an earlier panel had mentioned how important that localization is. And over the course of my work, I always try to find the solutions that are closest to the problems. And that happens when you trust experts that really thrive in their own spaces. Because when you allow partners to excel and really focus on what they do best, you can focus on what you do best. And together, you actually can pool your collective resources to achieve a specific impact.
And when you look at, you talk about the importance of those partnerships and really recognizing the strengths of them, right? What each partner is bringing to that equation. We talk about future now, as we're talking about today. As you're looking down the line, I wonder if there are things that you've learned specifically in the last 2 years that maybe change the way you're looking at those future partnerships and even where the foundation is going. Has it pushed you to shift a little bit?
Yes, definitely. And thinking about just even our partnership with Americares, it has been in a partnership that has evolved alongside our initiative. We started in our first phase focusing on PPE. Vicki Markham, who has been our partnership liaison, she has been tremendous and really continuing to have the conversation with us about where else can we have impact, what else can we do together, and that's really when we were able to make impact in Navajo Nation with providing PPE. We were able to expand our reach to India during the COVID wave there. We were able to expand our resources into mental health support. So I think the evolution of the partnership and really understanding that partnerships are meant to live, move, and breathe and grow as situations change, I think that's been essential. And I think back to your question about future now and what the workplace will look like, part of what we've learned at First Responders First, and again, what Arianna will definitely touch on, is that well-being cannot be considered to be something that healthcare workers, first responders, or any of us really need to do outside of the workplace. It needs to be embedded within the workflow. We have seen that with all of our partnerships. The most successful partnerships and programs that we've had when it comes to deploying mental health resources are when organizations and leaders prioritize their staff well-being, when they make it core to what they do and not only integrate it within the mission, but also provide that well-being service on company time so that it becomes a part of their whole response to a particular crisis.
And it becomes a part of who the company is, right? Exactly. Or who the organization is, and that's sort of in the DNA, and ideally they make that part of their employees' DNA, that it's always there. What have you enjoyed most about this work over the last couple of years, especially with First Responders First?
There's so many. I mean, the people who I've been able to work with, definitely the people. I think that seeing the power of partnership has been really what I've enjoyed the most. Knowing that you can dream far bigger together than you can dream by yourself, and really putting resources, pooling your collective resources together to achieve a particular issue. There is no limit. And we've seen that with the success of First Responders First. We've seen that with the success of Americares, just staying true to our essential mission. And you heard from Dean Michelle Williams earlier today. She is one of our fearless leaders. Another fearless leader you will be hearing from momentarily, Arianna Huffington. They have kept us so laser focused on our mission. During the COVID pandemic, there were so many needs that we could have tackled. We focused simply, not quite so simply, but simply on caring for the caregiver. And by really zeroing in on that mission, we were able to dedicate even more resources from all of what we were doing to be able to maximize our impact.
That's great. And it's been so great to have you here and to talk to you a little bit more about it. Thank you, Kasia. And as you mentioned, Arianna will be joining us. I think Arianna is actually with us now. Arianna, are you here?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Hello.
I loved hearing you, Kasia, describe the work you have been leading so amazingly.
Really fantastic. And we've loved hearing from Kasia, but we're also really excited now to hear from you. She gave us such a great sense of what inspired the Thrive Global Foundation, which of course is Thrive, but Thrive was inspired by you, and it's a story that I have to say I know well, but I don't know that everybody in the room does. And it was your own personal moment of burnout, a pretty intense moment that really caused you to reevaluate things, reevaluate the way you were approaching success and life, and led us in many ways to where we are today. So could you share that background and that story with everyone, please?
Absolutely. But Erica, first of all, let me say how sorry I am that I'm not physically with you. You and I were talking the other day, and I've definitely missed seeing you and talking about our lives. But unfortunately, I had to be in California. So, yes, my own personal wake up call came in 2007, on April 6th to be precise. 2 years into building the Huffington Post, I was the divorced mother of two teenage daughters. And I had bought into the collective delusion that in order to be super mom and super founder, I could not afford the luxury of taking care of myself. So I literally collapsed from what I was diagnosed with as burnout, hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone. In retrospect, it was a real blessing because it started me on this journey to change the way I lived and worked, and to also study burnout, to cover these issues relentlessly on the Huffington Post. And then in 2016, wanting to form a company that actually help people go from awareness to action, to help them change their behavior so that we could have healthier habits and a healthier life.
And it's working, as we're seeing in the foundation, but also in Thrive's work. As we look at this, so much of burnout, our ideas of success, what we feel we need to do, it's tied to our mental health, as we know. May, of course, is Mental Health Awareness Month. I think we could all maybe make the case that every month should be Mental Health Awareness Month. Stress plays such an important role in all of this, and it really can impact not only your focus, your decision making. It adds to those feelings of being overwhelmed. And one thing that I've actually really enjoyed learning more about is you advise tackling the stress with what you call micro steps, breaking things down into small, manageable bits, right, that allow you to achieve some success. So walk us through, if you would, what those micro steps are and why they are so successful.
So, Erica, it's so important to recognize, especially speaking with a room of high achievers who have big and noble goals they want to go after, that in fact, when it comes to our personal behavior, the way to achieve big goals is to start small, which seems counterintuitive. But all the science makes it clear that if we break it down into what at Thrive we call micro steps, tiny incremental daily steps that build into healthier habits that we call too small to fail, then they become sustainable. If you start with big New Year resolutions, most people end up breaking them in 2 or 3 weeks. So, micro steps are also an incredible way to interrupt the cycle of stress that you mentioned. And if stress becomes cumulative, that's when it leads to mental health problems like depression, anxiety, or binge eating or binge drinking. To be able to um, assuage that feeling of being marinated in cortisol and wired. So, 60 seconds, we know from neuroscience, can actually help us move from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system and course correct from stress. 60 seconds to focus on our breathing, to remember what we're grateful for, to stand up and stretch, anything that interrupts that cycle.
I've enjoyed reading about, you have all this science behind it, but reading about each one of these micro steps that is recommended. You mentioned a couple of the 60-second sort of reset, refocus, thinking about what you're grateful for, getting up from your desk. Which of these do you find are most effective for you personally?
So, my favorite micro steps are picking a time at the end of the day that I declare the end of my working day. And I do that by turning off my phone and charging it outside my bedroom. And related to that is when I wake up in the morning, not to rush to my phone. 72% of the world rushes to their phone before they're even fully awake. So, taking even 60 seconds again to set your intention for the day, to remember what you're grateful for. And the reason for all this emphasis on gratitude is that gratitude and fear and anxiety do not coexist.
So, meaning what? That they don't
Meaning that,
coexist because when you
meaning that
take the time to
gratitude,
recognize the.
meaning that gratitude is an antidote to anxiety, fear, stress. It's like when we're feeling grateful, we are full of what we love about our life. Even during a challenging time when we are also dealing with something difficult. So, gratitude and joy tend to change the way we experience what life brings us.
They really do. Our next panel is going to talk about what we're seeing in the workplace right now. There's so much change happening for so many people as they're maybe returning to the workplace or deciding what they want that workplace to be. When we look at mental health, I know that you have said we need to do more than just take the occasional mental health day, right? This is about the whole person, the whole well-being, and that it has to be, and Kasia alluded to this at Thrive, it really has to be embedded in the culture. And it has to be something that's there, not something that you try to fix once it's broken. So using maybe microsteps and other tools, what have you found, right? What are ways that employers can help protect their workers from burnout by embedding that culture and this recognition of the whole well-being?
So, as Kasia said, it's really about embedding well being, mental resilience, micro steps into the workflow. So, our entire Thrive platform of micro steps and storytelling to inspire and empower comes to employees wherever they are. If they are on Teams, on Slack, on Zoom, they can also download our app. But we want to make it super easy to remind them that we have this incredible place in us. We have these hidden treasures of peace, wisdom, strength. They are birthright. But as Thich Nhat Hanh said, it's never been easier to run away from ourselves. And of course, our addiction to social media, to our phones, to always being busy has made it so difficult.
I remember, I have to say, anecdotally, I remember years ago, it was maybe 10 years ago, you reached out to me, and I want to say it was probably for the week between Christmas and New Year's, and you said, I'm doing basically a digital detox. I'm not going to be on social media for a week, and Erica, will you join me? And I remember at the time I said, oh, I can't. I would love to, but I have to work that week, and I have thought about that moment in the years since multiple times, and why I made the decision that I did, why I felt like I couldn't take that break, and what would I really lose from it. And especially during the pandemic, as we look at some of the micro steps that you're suggesting, as people are resetting how they look at work, how they look at social media, how they look at the way all of these things influence them, you were definitely ahead of your game on that one. But how much do you think that has changed too? How much is that a part of the conversation at Thrive as you're looking at that whole well-being, talking to people about, I shut my phone off at this time of night. So we're going to shut things. I would like everybody to shut things down. I want to know that as a company, as a culture, right? We want everybody to be a part of something like that and to know it's okay.
Absolutely. I think people need to feel that they have cultural permission. That's why we tend to launch it with companies like we launched to the 90,000 employees, colleagues, as they call them at Pfizer. We launched with a webinar. We launched with a conversation between Angela Wang, the head of biopharma, and myself. So they know that they have cultural permission from leadership and that this is a whole cultural activation. It's not just the HR department checking an item and delivering a benefit. It's something that has full support from the leadership. And that's very important because, Erica, we are changing an entire culture, not just company cultures. We're changing a culture where, I mean, you're a lot younger than me, but we're both brought up in a culture where people bragged about how little sleep they got. I'll sleep when I'm dead. How they were up all night or answering texts in the middle of the night. And that was supposed to be a badge of honor. And it's scientifically crazy because the next day we're not going to be as effective and productive. But that's the huge cultural transformation going on right now. And it requires a mindset shift. That's why it's so important to have full leadership buy-in and support and leaders role modeling that behavior. I mean, we love at Thrive, Kasia is amazing. She runs the entire foundation. But every now and then she'll say to me, I'm taking a Thrive day, which we love. We want people to recognize when they want to take a Thrive day, which means a day when you unplug and take care of yourself. And don't allow yourself to become so depleted that maybe you get sick.
Yeah, I think we could all use that, right? To be able to say, I'm taking a Thrive day, and I just may steal
Yes.
that. As you rightly said, we are seeing this massive shift, and it's not just in the workplace. It's really a wholesale societal cultural shift, or at least an attempt at one. And when we look at, I think, how that relates to the workplace, there were, a number of people who had the ability to work from home over the last couple of years, which revealed not only for them, but I think likely for their colleagues and for a number of other people, just how challenging it is to have a full-time job, especially when it's perhaps more demanding because there were fewer boundaries, especially if you're also balancing caregiver life as a caregiver, whether you have children, whether it's an older relative, whether it's whoever it is within what your family looks like, you need to take care of. Women, as we know, were disproportionately impacted by that. I know you're not a big fan of the term balance. I'm not either, because I don't think it really exists. But boundaries are important, and setting those boundaries is increasingly important. So, what is your advice? What do you tell everybody at Thrive about setting those boundaries between your workday and your personal life?
Incredibly important. And we try to make it clear that it's important by something that we call the entry interview. So when somebody starts at Thrive, on their first day, they have a conversation with their manager that we call the entry interview. And the first question is, what is important for you outside of work? And how can we support you? And it's fantastic because we hear things like, it's important for me that I have 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 or whatever uninterrupted time with my children. Or it's important for me to take my daughter to school at 7 in the morning, or to make my physical therapy appointment at such and such a time, or to take care of an elderly relative. Whatever it is, they feel empowered to put it on the table, to let their manager know. And their manager keeps that in mind during their one on ones and whatever happens during their time at Thrive.
It's recognizing the whole person, right? Which is sort of what we talked about with first responders first, but really recognizing that there is a whole person that is there with you, which actually sort of transitions a little bit into these partnerships that we were talking about earlier, right? We know one of the most stressful fields today to work in is healthcare. It was rough before the pandemic. It certainly got worse during it. There was this partnership that sprung up early in the pandemic, as Kasia was telling us about, between Thrive, the Chan School of Public Health, the CAA Foundation, Americares, of course, to launch First Responders First. Why was that so important to you, to have this partnership, to be involved with someone like Americares?
Well, it was very important for us to be involved with an amazing organization like Americares and to take care of frontline healthcare workers, not just in all the ways that the world rallied to take care of them, like supplying protective equipment, but also in terms of their mental health. So our focus was very much on mental health micro steps that they could do even during the most challenging circumstances, supporting them with childcare, supporting them with meals, things that are really essential if you're going to be able to work without burning out. And that became the focus of this partnership and of the work with you.
On that, the theme of today's summit, as you know, is Future Now. What sort of changes do you see for the workplace on the horizon? And I'm wondering if any of them are things that may have come out of some of those partnerships.
Absolutely. We are actually very optimistic because of our partnerships with big companies and smaller companies, big companies like Accenture and Walmart and Salesforce, that this time um, the entire leadership is engaged in preventing burnout, addressing mental health needs. And I think that is incredibly significant. The CHRO of each company has become the most important executive next to the CEO because the connection has been made between the well being and mental resilience of employees and the bottom line. If employees are burnt out, attrition, retention, productivity, all these business metrics are affected. So I think that's a huge turning point for the future. As always, in periods of transition, Erica, some companies are ahead of others. That's why it's important for those that are ahead to be speaking up and to be addressing new needs as they emerge. I mean, Pfizer, for example, asked us to develop a new curriculum called Thriving Kids because so many of their employees are so affected by what's happening to their children. So even if they're fine, if your child is depressed or anxious, that is central to how you experience work and life. So supporting them in how to deal with that is also essential.
One last question for you before we let you go. What do you think impacted you the most? We're talking about the impact of COVID-19 and of the pandemic on so many different things. What did you find was the most impactful, either on you personally or in terms of inspiring, perhaps a change in your own life?
Well, on the personal level, Eric, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm actually a secret introvert. So I loved the fact that I had a lot more time by myself and with my children. On the level of the work we're doing, I obviously Thrive has done a lot of work with so many companies that has allowed us to see that although COVID was a time of incredible losses, it's also a catalyst for a once in a generation opportunity to redefine how we work and live. And that makes me incredibly optimistic. I think that's the silver lining of the pandemic.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Arianna, it's so great to see you. I look forward to the next time being in person. But thank you again
Yes.
for being with us today.
Thank you so
Really
much,
great to have
Erica.
you.
And thank you,
Kasia,
Kasia.